Hello Internet! In this video we're going to go through and we're going to be creating a little Spring Boot Java application in order to get some stock data from the interwebs. Yes. Now, to do this we're going to be using the Yahoo Finance API, and we are also going to be using... actually I think that's it. So let's get started. I've got a Spring Boot application which you can download in the doobly-doo. It'll be a zip file, you can just open that and we can get started. Right, so let's start off by going to the POM file. Ooh, here's the POM. We've got some dependencies. The only thing to note here is we've got this dependency called Lombok. Lombok is awesome. You'll see that throughout the video. It basically enables us to reduce the amount of boilerplate code we have. The next thing we're going to do is add a dependency for the Yahoo Finance API. So the group ID is com Yahoo Finance-API. And the artifact ID is Yahoo Finance API, and the version I'm using is 3.15.0. Probably while you watch the video there'll be a newer version. You might want to use that, but maybe it'll be slightly different when you use it. So if you use the exact same version as I do, you'll be able to follow along this video just fine. Okay, POM's all sorted. That should be all gravy. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and create basically we're going to have a stock service that's going to be able to get us some stock data. So we'll do that, and the best way to do that is to come over here. I am just going to say new package, let's call it service, and in here we will put the stock service. Now the stock service is going to interact directly with the Yahoo Finance API. For this purpose of this, we're just going to do some real basic stuff. We're not going to go really in depth with it, just so you can actually get some data, start having to play around with it yourself. Stock service, this is going to be an service. That is something that Spring Boot defines. So basically Spring Boot has this idea of the Spring Boot context, in which it has all manner of wonderful objects called beans, and it handles the construction and invocation of, well, not invocation actually, the construction of those objects and the state of those objects for you. So by annotating it with service, when we run our application, one of these stock services gets created for us. And I say one of them because they are a singleton by default. Next thing we want is, I'm going to want an all argument constructor. Now, we haven't got any arguments at the moment, but one thing we do have is a lovely annotation from Lombok, so we don't actually have to write the constructor ourselves, although there will be cases during this video where we are actually going to write some constructors because we need to. But that's fine for the moment. Let's start actually having a look at some of the methods. Now, we're going to create an object called a stock wrapper. We could probably call it something better, but I can't think of anything better. So we're going to have a method that returns a stock wrapper object, which is going to have the Yahoo Finance stock object within it, as well as another time in there, just so we can do some refreshing of the data if we wanted to. So we're going to create a method called find stock. It is going to take it's not going to take a stock because we won't have it at that point. It's going to take a ticker, i.e. the symbol of the stock, and we're going to encapsulate this in a try catch block, because what we're going to use is we're going to use the method from Yahoo Finance find price, which throws an IO exception. Now everywhere else I'm just going to throw it, I don't really care, but for this one I think we're going to reuse this method, and I don't with lambdas and stuff like that, so I can't be bothered sorting that way, so we're going to do it this way. Right, you'll see what I mean later. Return, and we want to return here a new stock wrapper. And our stock wrapper class, which we should probably create in a second actually, it's probably make more sense, is going to take a stock as the constructor, so the Yahoo Finance stock, but we haven't got the stock because we need to call Yahoo Finance, and then we need to call get, and then pass the ticker. Now the Yahoo Finance get method is, all it's going to do is it's going to go to Yahoo Finance and it's going to find us a lovely little stock. Now I have to find out where my Maven thing is at the side. I might have to exit out of presentation mode. This has already gone terribly wrong. where is it? This thing, right. If yours isn't showing up, Yahoo Finance, you're going to want to click this little button over here. You might not be able to see it very well, but Maven, refresh. It will refresh, and then it will enable you to import it. There we go. It stopped being a pain. There's probably a shortcut for that, but I don't know it. Okay, back to here. Import class is going to stop moaning. It's going to be like, oh, look at that, unhandled IO exception. But we are in the midway through of handling it in IntelliJ, so yeah. Catch IO exception, and we will just do nothing, or we'll maybe print, error. I don't really care. For the purposes of this video, we're not fussed too much about this. If we do have an error though, we would like to return null, just so we actually return something. Okay, let's actually go and define this stock wrapper, because at the moment what we've got is we're calling the Yahoo Finance API, we're getting a stock object on which we can perform other operations, but we don't know what this stock wrapper object is yet because I haven't got round to defining it. So create a new package, and we'll call it model, and inside here we will create the stock wrapper class. And the stock wrapper class, as I say, it's going to take a stock, and it's going to take a time, a local date time. The reason for it taking this is that we want to be able to refresh the data, and one of the ways we're going to do this is say set an interval. We're going to have a refresh service that's going to refresh the stock provided it's passed a certain amount of time. So let's say you want to refresh it every minute. You want to check the last time you actually got the data for that stock, and if it's greater than a minute, then yes, we'll refresh. If not, then we won't refresh. So we need a stock, so private final stock. We'll import that. Private final local date time, and that will be last access is what I'll call that, and we'll import that as well. Next we're going to create a constructor, but we're not going to be using lombok for this particular constructor because we want to, when we construct this, just create the last access time be now. Okay, or do we? No, yeah, let's do this. Okay, so we could do stock wrapper final stock, and we'll do this stock equals stock, but instead of doing last access, we're going to do last access is equal to local date time dot now. Now, if you want to be really good about this, you would need to put a clock in here. A clock is an object that basically allows you, when you're testing this later on, unit testing, you will be able to fix when now is basically relative to the clock that you pass it. But yeah, let's not do that. So the other things we're going to need to do is we want to define, we want to actually be able to get everything. I can't be bothered defining getters, so luckily Lombok's got us covered for that. We can import the Lombok getter. We also are going to want to update this local datetime last access value whenever we access it. Now, some of you might be like, oh, I know that. What we could do is we could have a setter. Now, we could totally do that. We could do this. We could have a setter here, right? Annotating the field with setter means that Lombok creates a setter for us. If we put the setter value up here, it would create a setter for the stock and last access. But the problem with that is that that mutates the state of an object, and really you're better off not doing that. We're probably better off actually just creating a whole new object, and we can do that with. One of the caveats though is we need to actually also have an all arguments constructor to do that, which we won't be using because we'll be using this, but with will be implicitly using all arguments constructor. Okay, that sounded like enough waffling. Ignore when it's saying there's related problems, it's just moaning at me for various things. We will sort those problems. So now I've got a stock service that's all dandy. Let's have a look at getting our first price, for example. So what we need to do is we need to come over here, and we're basically creating this stock service is a wrapper around the Yahoo Finance API. So the find price method of the Yahoo Finance API returns a big decimal. And so if we make our method called find price, or I think theirs is called get price or something like that. It's called something slightly different. You'll see what I mean. We'll pass in a stock wrapper. We'll just call it stock. And this find price will it will throw an IO exception. We'll just let it throw it. Like I said, we're just not going to bother with anything else. And what we'll do here is we'll say return stock, and we need to get the stock object from the stock wrapper, so get stock. Then we need to say we've got a whole load of methods that show up here. We want to get the get quote. Now, get quote takes a boolean that defines whether we should refresh the current value we've got, because we've actually got this stock object from the Yahoo Finance API. We can actually really handily figure out whether we need to get the latest price or not. Well, we might not care about it, but like I say, what we're going to do is we're going to implement a way of checking whether we want to actually refresh this data and get the latest data. But for the moment, we'll just put true. And then what we need to do is we need to just say get price on that, and that will return our price. Now let's have a look at this actually working in action. So the way I'm going to actually invoke this for the purposes of these videos is we're just going to create a little test class that we can just invoke just to make things nice and easy. It is going to be annotated with Spring Boot, Spring Boot test, sorry. This is so that this invokes the Spring Boot context. We're going to import test and then do void, I don't know, invoke or something like that. So this actually isn't a proper test. I'm just writing it so we can actually invoke things. You could actually do proper stuff with your application, but for the purpose of the video, we're just going to be invoking stuff via a test. So if we first have a look at actually getting a stock, we can say final stock wrapper, and then we'll just call it stock. We need to get a stock service. How do we get the stock service? Well, what we can do up here, is auto wire that stock service. Now, auto wiring basically means that we're allowing Spring to take over the control of actually creating stuff. So you remember how I said it was a service, it was annotated with a service? That means that the stock service, when we create Spring, when we actually run the application, is being present within that Spring context. And if we want to access that, we can just auto-wire it. Now, normally you'd auto-wire things in a constructor, but here, because it's a test, we just do auto-wiring it as a field. Auto-wiring it as a field is generally a bad idea, but it doesn't matter too much for this. So, what we'll do, we'll say stock service, and then we've got our two methods that we've defined here. First, we need to get a stock. We need to have a ticker. I always use United Utilities as an example in these videos. So we'll get United Utilities like that. And then what we'll do is we will print out stock get stock, because obviously we've got the wrapper here. We want to print out the actual stock and see what happens. And what we can do, we can run invoke, and this should load up the terminal, and hopefully the terminal will be visible in presentation mode. There we go, it is. You can see the Spring Boot context loaded there. The test passes because there isn't actually anything we're testing, but the Spring Boot context loads and we get the stock back. Another thing you can see is that we're actually sending a request to finance.yahoo.com, and that's what the Yahoo Finance API is doing under the hood. So we've got the stock. Let's say we actually want to get the price from it. Well, dead simple. All we need to do, again, so you can see it actually does have the price with it, but by using our method here, we actually can determine to get the latest price. So we could do this, and we can pass in our stock like that, and then we'll print out the price. Run that again, and we'll see the price gets printed. Right, it's moaning because I haven't. I just need to come up to the top of the test, and I just need to say throws. Not interrupted in section. No, that's not IO. That's IO. There we go. Run that. It will start running. Do some pre-compile checks. Doesn't matter. Here we go. Spring Boot context is going. And there we go. We can see the stock prints there. And then it sends another request. And that's because we've got that refresh set to true. And it updates the stock symbol with for UU. And then it gets us the price. Now, obviously, the price hasn't changed at the moment. The markets aren't open. It doesn't really matter. But this will actually get you new prices when we actually refresh stuff and actually the markets are open. Okay, the next thing we should do is we can look more about getting other prices and things like that in a minute, but let's have a look at creating our refresh service. The refresh service will enable us to figure out whether we actually want to refresh the stock or not, as I've mentioned. So we'll get rid of the terminal for now and we'll come up to our refresh service, which we're going to annotate again with the @service annotation. And the way we're going to actually figure out whether we should be refreshing things or not is we're going to use a scheduled executor service to basically schedule some execution, and every, say, 50 minutes we're going to check against all of the stocks we have, or maybe the one stock we have, and we are going to set the should refresh to true if it hasn't been refreshed within the last 15 minutes. So to do that, let's first start off by creating our scheduled executor service, and I'm just going to create this as static. So private static final scheduled executor service scheduler, we'll call it, and executors. Where is it? So this is the factory method. I think, is it a factory method? Executors, new thread pool, and we only want one thread. We don't care about anything else. Why is that imported? Get rid of that. And then what else do we want? So for the moment, we'll just leave that as it is. We're going to create a method called public void should refresh every, let's say 15 minutes. For the purpose of this video, though, we're not going to wait 15 minutes to do anything. We'll make it shorter. And now what we need to do is we need to call the scheduler, and we're going to schedule at a fixed rate. So there we go. And scheduler takes a runnable, takes an initial delay, and a period and a time unit. Okay. So first thing we need to do is we need to create our runnable. Now we can do that just as a lambda. So we can create a little lambda, and what the lambda is going to be is basically a loop, and we're going to have a loop of stocks. So another thing we need to define here actually is a map. I think is the best way of doing this. So we're going to have a map, final map, stock wrapper, and we'll do boolean stocks to refresh, something like that. So are we going to import that, or is it just going to be a pain? There we go. And we'll create a constructor while we're here, because we want to create this as a new hash map, so we can't really use Lombok to do that. So we just want to say stocks to refresh is equal to new hash map. We don't need it to be sorted or anything like that. Okay, so coming back to our scheduler, we're going to say stocks to be refreshed, or stocks to refresh for each, and the for each method will return us our key, and it will return us our actual boolean in this case, or the value. So it will be stock and then should refresh. Actually, I don't think we need to care about that, so I'm just going to say like value, because I don't think we're going to use it. We're not going to use it. Then what we need to do is we need to check some stuff. We need to check if stock get last accessed is before, and then we can say local date time dot now minus some amount. Now for this, let's create another little variable up here. We'll call it a private static final, and it will be a duration, and we'll just call it the refresh period. If you can type, duration of, for this, let's just say seconds, 15 seconds, something like that. Okay, and then that will just be refresh period. So if that's the case, then we need to say, let's just log something out. Should be using a logger, but I'm just going to be using console, standard printout line, whatever it's called, for the purposes of this. Setting should refresh, and then we want to do the stock, get stock, and we'll get the symbol, because we can also get the symbol, because that's part of the Yahoo Finance API. And if that's the case, if we should be refreshing it, what we need to do is we need to do stocks to refresh, delete, delete not a method, remove, there we go. We need to remove the key, and the key will be the stock. In its place, we're going to say stocks to refresh, put. Then we're going to use that with method to create a whole new object that's got a new last access time, and we can do stock with last accessed local date time of now. And then what we want to set in the Boolean field is true. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. Yes, we do. We want to set true, because what we're doing here is we're checking if it's not been accessed within the last 15 minutes, say, or 15 seconds, then we know that we've got stale data. We need to update it, which means the next time it gets called, we want to refresh that. So we're going to say true. And then we need to finish this off by giving it the time to actually run our scheduled executor service. So there's no delay to begin with, so we just want to run straight away and then have 15 seconds. There we go. What looks wrong here? That is not the right lambda there, so we'll replace that. Cool. Stop moaning straight away. And the other thing we want to do as well is we want to no, that's not called should actually, is it? That should be, let's say, set refresh every 15 minutes, and then up here in the constructor we'll set that. So as soon as we actually instantiate this, which will be done by the Spring context because this is a service, this scheduled executor will start executing. It'll execute every 15 seconds. We'll see nothing happen though if the map's empty, because it will say for each and there'll be nothing in there, so it will just carry on its merry way. Now, the next thing we probably need to do, and actually thinking about this, we should probably make this private. But what's the public API of this going to be? Well, the public API of this is going to be a getter, basically, and we're going to say get should refresh, or maybe we'll just say should refresh. Okay, and we want to pass in here a stock wrapper. Why? Because we're going to use the stock wrapper to access the variable in the map, and we're also going to potentially put the stock in the map. So what's going to happen here is we're going to say if stocks to refresh doesn't include the particular key we're looking at here, so we can say contains key, pass in the stock. If this stock that we're passing to this method isn't in our stock to refresh method, it means we haven't actually called it yet. We haven't refreshed it. We haven't got the data for this yet. So really we want to say, yeah, we should refresh the data on the first call. So what we can do is we can say stocks to refresh dot put stock and true. And we don't have to actually do the same thing up here where we've created a, or down here, sorry, where we've added a new date time, because we can just assume that this has been created relatively soonish for us to be calling should refresh. Might be wrong on that, but that's an assumption I'm going to make. Wouldn't be too difficult to fix anyway. And then we're going to return no, we're going to return true. We don't should refresh is good, sorry, will be false, because we're saying, but basically we're going to be calling this method when we call any of our API methods. So find price, for example. So if we call find price, we're checking whether we should refresh this. Now on the first call, it gets into here, it gets into this little loop here. We want to say on any subsequent calls, so when we actually check if this is in here, we're going to be coming down here. we want to actually check that we don't refresh it. So we refresh it on the first time, but then if it already contains this key and this key is already in that map, then we know that the stock has already been refreshed in the last, so on and so forth. So we really want to, it's already in the map, so we want to check what the map says, because the map will have the most up-to-date information, because we've got this logic going off down here. Sound like a mouthful. I'm sure it will make sense when we see it happen. We'll then do stock to refresh, get, and then just do the key. The key is the stock, and there we go. Okay, this looks like it's all good at the moment. So let's go back and have a look at our service, and we'll have a look at actually adding some more gubbins to this. So one of the things we've just done with the refresh service is we've enabled us to have multiple stocks. So we could really have another method where we find not just one, not just two, but as many stocks as we actually feel like. So let's do that next. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we'll say public list, and then stock wrapper. We'll say find stocks, final list string, and we're going to take some tickers like that. And what we can do here is we can return, and we can use some lovely lambda-y stuff. Say tickers.stream. Then we can use the map function. Say this find stock, not find stocks. It's going to moan at the moment because we actually not returned anything yet. We know that this returns null if it has an error, so we need to filter out anything that's null. So we can say filter objects non-null, so only things that are non-null will get past this filter and get to the next stage. Now, if you haven't used streams before in Java, you've probably been living under a rock, but if you haven't used them, well, what happens is a stream is lazily evaluated, meaning that the moment, if I called this method, shit all would happen. Nothing's going to happen because a stream is not evaluated until it has a ternary operator called on it. A terminating operator, or whatever it's called. And one of those is the collect method. So if I call collectors, I can call collectors to list. And now this will execute all of this lovely stuff and collect everything we have in here to a list. So what's happening? We're going through all of the tickers we get given, and we're mapping them to a stock, meaning we'll take the ticker, we'll pass it here, and we'll return the new stock wrapper. That will then get filtered out in case anything null comes through. The null stuff gets thrown out, and everything else gets collected to a list. So we have a lovely list of stock wrappers in there. And let's have a look now at just adding some other methods that we can use in the Yahoo Finance API. I'll leave it up to you to find even more of them, but we'll just have a look at some of the cool ones we can look at. So big decimal, we can look at the last change in percent, which is always a useful one. Like what was the, how much did it fall or rise the previous day? We can do a stock wrapper here, so we can take that stock wrapper. Because what we've done here now is we have created, and we'll throw IO exception as well. We've created a wrapper around the Yahoo Finance API, which now has a new thing. There's something I forgot. We haven't done what we want to do yet. So what we need to do here is, whoops. Why is that not working? Okay. We need to say private final refresh service. This is going to moan at me because it's not initialized, but it has been initialized because of the all arguments constructor. Remember how I said that you can auto wire things? What's actually happening here is quite interesting, is that we are implicitly auto wiring this. So we know this is a service that's in the Spring context. What's going to happen is that all arguments constructor is going to be called by Spring when the service starts, and this will just be invoked straight away. So even though it looks like it's not being initialized, it actually is. And here we can say refresh service, should refresh, and just pass in that stock. There we go. And now here, let's have a look at the last change in percent. So we can say return stock, get stock, get the quote. Then we want to say refresh service, should refresh stock. And then we want to get the change in percent. There we go. Now we can get the change in percent. We'll look at perhaps two more that I find pretty interesting. Actually, one more that I find pretty interesting. This will be the 200-day moving average. This is a really interesting metric if you're into stocks. So we can say find change from 200-day mean in percent. Say stock wrapper. Well, we don't want to call it stock wrapper, just call it stock. This will also throw an IO exception. Like I say, I don't care about those for the purpose of this. What we could do, again, stock, get quote, should refresh, and then pass that stock in there, and then get the change in average 200%. Okay, so that's some of the API we've created. Let's just have a look at the test now, and we should be able to just have a little test of this and have a little play around with what's going to happen. So let's get us the change. So we can say change stock service, and then find last change in percent stock. We'll print that out, and we'll say final big decimal. Mean 200-day percent, something like that. So the 200-day mean, we can do stock service again. And do this, pass that, and then get the mean in 200-day percent. We run this now, that'll be all cool, and it will get us all of our stuff. Okay, so looking down here, what we've got is we've got stock gets called, we get the refresh the first time we call one of the API methods, as well as the first time we actually call it, because we don't know how long the two will be apart. There's the price. There is the last change in percent. Here is the difference in percentage from the 200-day moving mean. So it's 6% lower, which is good from the 200-day moving mean, because it suggests that it's cheaper than it was 200 days ago. Yada, yada, yada. Let's now have a look at what we can do if we want to get multiple stocks. So to get multiple stocks, and we're going to illustrate some of the stuff we've actually created now, we'll just do something like void multiple, and what we'll do, this will throw an IO exception again, and it will also throw an interrupted thread exception, because we want to have a look at what happens when we start checking for refreshes. So we'll see what happens here. So we can do final list stock wrapper, stock service. Then we can do find stock, so our other method, and we can say arrays as list. Now you might have a list of tickers that you want. I actually provide one of these on the old website, but for this we're just going to get Amazon and Google, and we'll call this stocks or something like that. Then I want to create a little private method in here, just because we're going to call this method more than once that we're going to create. We just basically want to find the prices of these, and I just wanted to call it in the test just for fun. Okay, stock wrapper, stocks. We can do stocks for each stock past the lambda like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a try block, because we've got these methods that throw exceptions. Do system print out stock service, find price, and then pass that stock. And we don't want it to be called stocks up here, actually it needs to be called stock. Okay, there we go. It's moaning here that we haven't actually caught anything yet, so catch IO exception E, and then just ignore. We don't care. The purpose of this. Right, so what else do we need to do? I don't think we need to do anything else apart from add a cheeky little semicolon at the end of here. So now we can call find prices in here. You wouldn't have to do this normally, it's just because we're using a test to do this. What we want to do is we want to find the prices. Then I want us to call thread sleep for 16 seconds. 16 seconds because it's 1 second above the 15 seconds with which we would actually start seeing things get refreshed. And then what we want to do is we want to get a new stock. So we'll say final stock wrapper. We'll get the AA stock. We'll say stock service, find stock, and then it will be AA.L for London. And then we can add that to our list. Add AA. Then we can find the price of AA. So we can say this stock service, find price AA. And then if we find the prices again for all of them, so now there's 3 stocks in this list, what we're going to find, because we've gone 16 seconds, we're going to find that both Apple and Amazon get refreshed, but because we've only just created this one, it won't get refreshed. So we're gonna have a run of this test now, and we'll have a look and see what happens. We're gonna get our stocks, find the stocks, print the prices out, wait for 16 seconds. So we've got our price here for Google, we've got our price here for Amazon. Oh, look at that, we've refreshed Google and Amazon. And what's going to happen is we should see that we get a price for, there we go, we get a price at the bottom down here for AA. And notice how AA didn't get refreshed. So there we are. That's all about everything I wanted to cover in this video. If you have any questions, comments, or want me to go over other stuff in new videos, let me know and I'll do that. Subscribe for more. I think that's what you're supposed to say if you're on YouTube. And arrivederci. Ta-ta.